Right. So today we're talking about Taoism. And Taoism is an ancient tradition in China. It goes back to at least 500 BCE, if not earlier. And that is when we have Lao Tzu, who is an older contemporary of Kung Fu Sei, who we refer to as Confucius here in the West. And these two systems in China, Confucianism and Taoism, are very much like the yin yang. If you're familiar with that symbol, where you have like a circle, but then the circle's divided by like two teardrop or like paisley shapes, and they're in movement and constant movement and change, where the one is moving into the other in a constant cycle. And if you'll notice in the yin yang symbol, there are a small part of its opposite contained within the other. So you'll see a little black eye in the white field and a little white eye in the black field. And what that's trying to symbolize is that in all things, like in victory are the seeds of defeat. In defeat are the seeds of victory. And it's so interesting when you think about those sorts of things, how everything is contained within everything else. And the way I like to describe this, and once again, I'm sorry I don't have a whiteboard, so I'm just going to draw with my hands in the air. The totality of reality is one. If you can just think of one circle, and it contains everything, but there is no distinction here because all is one. There is no good and evil. There is no light and darkness. There is no high and low. There is no tall and short. Everything just is. This is that beyond place, beyond human words, beyond human language, of pure being, of oneness, of everything is there. But out of that oneness comes the two, and the two is the yin yang symbol, a male, female, light, darkness, water, dry land. And if you look at the Genesis account in the Hebrew tradition and Christian tradition, it's the creation is laid out in like these pairs of opposites, right? Day one, God says, let there be light. So we have the light and the darkness. Then day two, we have God separating the waters. And then day three, we have the separation of the water from dry land. And so we have all these distinctions, these either or, these male, female, black and white, good and evil, are all kind of tied into this world. Here, everything is one, there is no distinction. But in this space time world in which we live, we have all these dualistic principles going on. But then from the one comes the two, the two, and from the two comes the three. And then you get three of those teardrop shaped symbols in that one. And so from black and white, we get gray. From hot and cold, we get warm. From male and female, we get a child. And so out of the one comes the two, out of the two comes the three, and from the three comes all things. So everything you can see in the physical material world comes from that one into the two, into the three, into all things, but all things are contained within that one. So everything, all those movements are happening within the one. There is nothing outside the oneness. But I just think it's such an interesting concept and way to think about things. And what I so you got a little history from that video I showed you, but I'll repeat it quickly. So Lao Tzu um, is trying to find the right way to live. So he's kind of like, this could be like a philosophy or an ethicist as much as a religion. And a lot of people, there are two different distinct branches of Taoism. One is more philosophic, and that's the one I personally prefer. And then you have a more religious one, and that's where you see people like flying around, jumping from rooftop to rooftop. If you ever saw like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or Hero with Jet Li, or any of those kind of like fantastical Chinese epic sagas, and you see these people achieving these incredible martial arts feats, that's coming out of that Taoist tradition. Also looking for immortality. That's a big Taoist goal, looking for elixirs of eternal life. And like they said, it's very different from like the Egyptians' idea of mummification or the Christian idea of resurrection. This is trying to maintain your physical body for as long as you can, and, and carrying your soul life through it. Anyways, where Kung Fu Se or Confucius was more concerned about how do we live in society. He was all about etiquette and manners, birth orders, how should we behave. And it makes sense, right? Even at that time, China had a huge population, and they're trying to figure out how do we live together in community without tearing each other apart. Well, Lao Tzu, on the other hand, he wasn't concerned about living in community. He was simply concerned with living. How is the best way to live? And for him, it wasn't having manners and etiquette and all these matrices and categories. It was to follow the natural flow of nature. And the first thing you have to do is to become a keen observer of nature and of yourself, and to see, am I aligned with the natural flow of nature, or am I going against it? If I go with it, I'll be fulfilled, I'll flourish, I'll prosper. If I go against it, it will just be like hitting my head into a wall, and I will eventually be crushed, wear myself out, and defeated. So the goal is to find out what is the way of nature, and that's one of the translations of the Tao, Tao, and it's pronounced more with a D, like Tao. But the Tao, it's the best way I can explain it to like a Western audience, especially a Christian audience, is the Tao equals the Logos. Okay. And if you remember the Logos, that is that cosmic consciousness, universal reason, but it's used in John's Gospel, chapter 1, where it says, in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. In the King James, that is translated as word, and it's the same with the Tao. You can translate it as way, but it means way more than that. It means like cosmic consciousness, universal reason. And in Chinese translations of the Bible, they actually use that word in John 1. In the beginning was the Tao, and the Tao was with God, and the Tao was God, and the Tao became flesh and dwelt among us. And I found a really interesting book written by some Eastern Orthodox monks who were missionaries into China. And when they read the Tao Te Ching, they were absolutely blown away. And this is the book Lao Tzu left at the border crossing, where he was fed up with China. He was just going to head out into the wild and waste places, riding on his ox. But there's a couple versions of the story. One is he was being taxed before he left China. And since he was a scholar and had wisdom, they wanted a percentage or a piece of that. And that's how one version says we got this book, the Tao, or the Tao Te Ching. And this is the copy I prefer, and I think it's because it's the first one I read, and I've become kind of partial to it. But this one is done by Guy G.I.A., Guy Fu Fang, and Jane English. And I think having a native-born English speaker and a native-born English speaker collaborating together was really helpful, because they could communicate the ideas better in a way that would be understood in both cultures. Another benefit of this book, it makes a nice coffee table book, is he's a calligraphist. So he does this nice ancient Chinese calligraphy, and she's a photographer. And so you have this nice combination of calligraphy and photography going with the ancient text of the Tao Te Ching. I think it's only like 81 chapters. It's very short. But he left that and then took off. And absolutely one of my favorite books of all time. Like they mentioned, outside the Bible, this is the next most translated book in the world. And I've probably given away more copies of this book than any other book. When China first started opening up and allowing people to travel, I had a Chinese transfer student from mainland China. And when he was in my office and he saw this book, the Tao Te Ching, he got so excited because At that time, this was probably 25 years ago, this book was still banned in China. The Chinese people couldn't even read this book because they were afraid what would happen if people read it and followed what it was saying. Because, like that video was saying, Confucianism works really well with the authoritarian or totalitarian sort of government because it's all about control, conformity, doing what you're told, not making waves, a lot like Stoicism in the West. This, you're living a very self disciplined, orderly, productive life. Taoism is just like, forget that. I'm going to be like the wind, baby, and I'm just going to blow, or I'm going to be like the water and I'm just going to flow. Go with the flow is a total Taoist concept. So when you're, I'm going to read some of my favorite chapters in here to you, and then we'll talk about them a little as a group. But this is where most of the martial arts get their core belief, or the essence of them is coming from Taoism, because what you're doing is you're actually learning to respond and to flow like nature. So, for example, when water, which is like the Tao, comes up to an opposition, like a mountain or a hill, instead of just slamming into it over and over again, it will find the path of least resistance and it will go around. Or, and that's how a lot of these martial arts work. It's redirection, right? You're not fighting fire with fire or fist with fist or blow for blow. Instead, you're redirecting. You're going around. You're not engaging in this sort of butt your head conflict like we have in the West. We're much more into directly engaging the enemy or a problem or a philosophic concept or a theological issue. In the East, especially in Taoism, it's much more nuanced. And instead of this direct conflict, it's like, no, let's move around, let's disarm, let's flow past the obstacle and keep moving. And water eventually will wear down all obstacles in its path. Even mountains will eventually one day be washed to the sea. And so Taoism is trying to find this principle and then to apply it to our lives. There is a book out called The Tao of Pooh, Pooh, like Winnie the Pooh. And this, I don't have it here with me, it must be in my office, but it's a great way to learn about Taoism because he takes the Christopher Robin's, what is it, 40 acre or 100 acre wood and all the little characters, but he uses them to explain Taoism to a Western audience. And it's really clever because Pooh is like the perfect Taoist, because Pooh just is. When he's hungry, he eats. When he's tired, he sleeps. Um, when he's happy, he sings. When he's sad, he cries. He just totally is living in the moment. But like Piglet is always frantic and worried and borrowing trouble. And the Taoist would say, Piglet, you need to just embrace who you are and find your place and flow with that in the universe, in the 100 acre wood. And that's how you'll find happiness and contentment. Don't try to compare yourself to Tigger or to Owl or to Rabbit. And you don't have to be afraid, but be aware, find out who you are, and be that. Don't let other people tell you how you're supposed to be. Same thing with Owl. Owl is all in his head, right? He's all into book knowledge and he's always pontificating and he's making everything more complicated than it has to be. Where Pooh is just direct. He just goes directly with his desires, with how to satisfy them, and how to be content and live in the world. Pooh totally lives in the moment. He's like the uncarved block of wood. And the uncarved block of wood has infinite potential. But once you start carving on it, every little um, piece of wood you remove now limits the potential of that uncarved block. For example, I have much less potential than the other people here in this room and this conference call. And part of that's because I'm older, I've made a lot more choices. But see, each time you make a choice, it removes other options and your path gets narrower and narrower the more you travel. So because I've made so many choices through my life, my path has narrowed and narrowed and narrowed. Now, sometimes it will open up more opportunities based on the path you took, but you're also losing the half of potential possibilities if you would have taken that other path. And so each path is like narrowing and bringing you closer to actualization. Anyways, like I said, you can look at this as a religion, but and in the religious aspect, it's more like polytheism, where there's lots of different gods and goddesses. And like they mentioned, it's kind of similar to Roman Catholic saints, where they have special days. Each deity has a special power or ability. So if you lost your shoe, or if you got sick, or if you're going on a journey, you would look to different deities to be your patrons, or you might send them a little prayer or a little offering, or leave them some fruit or burn some incense. Um, but the philosophic Taoism is much more interested in how to bring our essential selves in harmony with the universe. And if you've ever traveled through the wilderness or through the desert, if you follow the flow of the water, you follow the water down, it's like natural paths through the forest, through the jungle, through the desert. But if you try to go against the flow of water, oh, good Lord, it's just like a maze and an obstacle course. And so if you just follow those dry washes down through the desert, it's just a nice, easy walk all the way down into the valleys, right, where it opens up. But if you try to go against those things, you're going to be going up and down, around, up, over, in, down, and it's just exhausting. Go with the flow, be like water. And that was Bruce Lee's whole big thing too, right? That was the method of his martial arts. It's like being like water. All right, I'm going to read you a few chapters and with some commentary. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one can see the manifestations. These two spring forth from the same source, but differ in name. This appears in darkness, darkness within darkness, the gate of all mystery. Whew! Holy cow! So right out the chute, Lao Tzu is bringing it. And I just love this idea of the name that can be named is not the eternal name, right? Because what happens is once you can name something, you take it from that realm of the oneness and you've moved it down into the realm of opposites. This is where you get black and white, good and evil, names and no names, categories. Up here, all is one. And in the second part, where it says, ever desireless, one can see the mystery. And remember, that's what Buddhism is trying to achieve, that desireless state, because in that state, all distinctions go away and you can enter into that oneness. So the Taoists are well aware of this. If you want to see the essence of something or the unity of something, you have to let go of desire. You have to detach. You have to step back. But unlike the Buddhist, the Taoists also understand there's a time where you want to engage in space time. You might want to start a business. You might want to be a conqueror. You might want to have a family, a wife or a husband and children. And those things, if you just detach out and have no desire, well, you're not going to be a very good shopkeeper, are you? Or warlord or husband or wife. If you've just checked out and you have no more desire about the well-being of your family, of your business, of your country. That's what you have to do to be in that place of peace and rest. You can't be concerned anymore how things are going, how they turn out. You just have to accept it and go with the flow of what's happening. You just embrace the flow. But the Taoists realize if you want to see the manifestations, then you should desire. And I love this about Taoism and why I like it more than Buddhism, because I like aspects of Buddhism, and there are times I would love to check out and just be in that bliss consciousness, not worrying about the rent, not worrying about papers do, not worrying about health issues. You're just in this detached, desireless bliss place. But that's not my whole life. The other 90% of the time, I got mouths to feed. I got to keep a roof over people's heads. I got jobs to do. I got bills to pay, roads to drive, gas to burn. I got all this stuff. And a Buddhist would have a problem navigating that, I believe, within that system, because it's taking them away from that desireless state they're trying to be in. But for the Taoists, it's almost like a toggle switch in the mind. They can, if they need to detach, they can hit the desireless switch. And if they need to engage, they put it into full throttle desire. And then they fully engage and they're fully present, whether they're making war or they're making love. They are in the moment, they're completely involved, they're present. And anyways, that's the first Tao. I think it's a great way that is how I would define the name of God personally. The name that cannot be named, because it's beyond us. We don't know, we know character names of God, like attribute names, but I don't know the proper name of God. And that was a big thing with the Jews, right? Knowing the name of God. So instead he gets titles like Elohim, or El Shaddai, or we get all these different names that describe his attributes or his authority or position, but not a proper name for God. Okay, next. Under heaven, all can see beauty as beauty only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good only because there is evil. Therefore, having and not having arise together. Difficult and easy complement each other. Long and short contrast each other. High and low rest upon each other. Voice and sound harmonize each other. Front and back follow one another. Therefore, the sage goes about doing nothing, teaching without talking. The 10,000 things rise and fall without cease. Creating yet not possessing, working yet not taking credit. Work is done, then forgotten. Therefore, it lasts forever. Holy cow. That and this is how the whole book is. It's these like little terse jam-packed statements that you have to kind of unpack, and like, what is Lao Tzu getting at? And I don't know, to be honest, if he was writing this under duress, he might have wrote it a lot more difficult than it needed to be for these concepts. But I just love this writing style. And so let's start with the beginning. Under heaven, in space time, we only know beauty as beauty if there's also ugliness. You have to have the match set, otherwise, you're not going to be able to distinguish one from the other. You can't understand pleasure unless you understand pain. Yes. You can't understand the light unless you've known the darkness. And so these are match sets and they go together. Even in the Genesis account, once again, it wasn't just the tree of knowledge, it was the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It came as a match set. You didn't just get the knowledge of good, because in order to have the knowledge of good, you must also have the knowledge of evil. They come together. Otherwise, it would not make sense. And I was tripping on this the other night thinking about heaven and how can we live in a blessed, glorious state, and how can we have any pleasure and sense of fulfillment and accomplishment if there's no pain, if there's no loss, if there's no suffering? And I guess the big theological explanation for that is the thing that allows for eternal and complete bliss in heaven is because its match set is unmitigated and eternal pain and suffering in hell. So you still have the pairs. It's simply now in this set, it's all suffering, and in this set, it's all joy and peace and harmony and love and all those sorts of things. I don't know. That was just kind of tripping me out. How can we have pleasure if we don't have pain? That they're kind of go together, right? And it's the same with the martial arts, like qigong. You can use qigong to hurt someone or to heal someone, because it's those same pressure points that you're striking blows to disable your enemy are the same ones that are being massaged or have poultices or with like acupressure or acupuncture. Those are the same points that they're using to try to restore your vital energy, that can also be used to disrupt or damage or harm your vital flow and energy. So that's that yin yang piece once again. Do you guys know what a sage is? He uses that word a lot in this book because Lao Tzu was a sage. A philosopher is someone who gets to enlightenment or seeking truth through reason, through logic, through scholasticism, through education, like books, reading, teaching. So that's a philosopher. A sage is someone who is also searching for truth, but they do it through life experience. So it's more like the existential path. Now they reach the same conclusions and points as the philosopher often, but they're arriving at it through a different path. This is through life experience, this is through logic and reason. And then the mystic would be someone who isn't following the path of logic or reason or of personal experience, but the mystic is looking for like direct intuition from above. It's like a direct download that's not coming through reason or emotions, but it's coming directly to our nous or that higher part of our being from above, from the divine. Anyways, I just wanted to make sure you knew what a sage was. It's not a cooking herb, not in this context. We're almost out of time. I'll probably do some more for you on Wednesday. Chapter 3. Not exalting the gifted prevents quarreling. Not collecting treasures prevents stealing. Not seeing desirable things prevents confusion of the heart. The wise therefore rule by emptying hearts and stuffing bellies, by weakening ambitions and strengthening bones. If people lack knowledge and desire, then intellectuals will not try to interfere. If nothing is done, then all will be well. And I love this so much. Every year at school, when they want to do awards, like who was the best Greek student, who was the best athlete, who was the best aviation student, and they always ask me, who are you going to give an award to this year, Fred? And I quote to them this chapter from the Tao. Not exalting the gifted persons prevents quarreling. And think about it. Think about how many people worked hard in Greek or in theology or in athletics or in aviation, and then we exalt one person and praise them. Well, how's that going to make everybody else feel that worked hard? There might have been mitigating things. Maybe one person was taking care of their sick mother. Maybe another one had a wife and kids. Maybe another person had to work 3 jobs or was living in their car. I mean, there's all sorts of things, right? But when we elevate one person for whatever reason above the group, what are we saying about everyone else and the group as a whole? So it's a very different mentality and way of thinking than the competition of there is only one winner, there is only one first place, that mentality we have in the West. And this is much more of a cooperative. And the other, I love this. If you want to prevent stealing, simply don't have anything worth being taken. I never I never worry about getting robbed. I had a VW bus for like 10 years and I couldn't lock the doors on it. But I never worried about my bus and no one ever stole anything from my bus. And I'm not saying it couldn't have happened. And yeah, I would keep camping gear and stuff in there and I would feel bad about that. But it was so hard to start that vehicle. You would have to be like a gymnast. I would have to do such elaborate things with the choke and the clutch and just kind of really coaxing it with the gas. I mean, no one's going to be able to steal that vehicle because it barely ran to begin with. But I had other friends that would come with their new cars. I'd lived way out in the country, and they'd have an alarm on it. They would have it locked. And I'm not kidding you. Every 5 minutes, they're peeking out my window of my house, checking on their car, making sure it's not getting messed with. And this is a great principle. It's, where are you putting your value, your hope, your trust, your esteem? If it's in things, you're not going to have any peace, because things can be broken, they can be stolen, they can wear out. And if that's where you're putting your well being, you are going to suffer, and you're going to be paranoid, and you're going to worry about thieves. But if you don't have things, and that's not where your affections are, people can never entice you with things, and they can never threaten you by taking your things, because it doesn't matter to you. Those are all transitory. Those are things that come and go. You are focused on the things that are eternal. You are focused on the way. And as long as you're following the way, none of that other stuff matters. All right. We'll pick up there next time.
Wait, that bit about